thing that happened, well, actually, and so I decided to have a midwife deliver my child. While I got connected with her, I told her that I wanted an all-natural, my idea was to have an all-natural childbirth, and I wanted to try having a water birth, which is, she had a birthing tub, and you can have your baby in the water. I thought that that sounded relaxing and would help with labor pains when I wasn't taking any kind of painkiller for that. And I did check with her. I told her that another OBGYN had said my pelvis was too narrow, and she said, well, that might be the case, but we're very close to the hospital, and she said in any situation where you labor too long, I would drive you immediately to the hospital, or we call an ambulance or whatever is necessary. So I felt comfortable with that. She seemed decent, and I think my only reservation that came up was I was a little bit worried about how quickly we could get to a hospital if we needed to. And I started to wonder if, what if for some reason I did need painkillers, like it was horrible pain, or I needed a C-section, because I had that in the back of my mind, that the C-section thing was always in my mind, that this woman had told me that I was going to be an automatic C-section. So I was really trying to do what was the safest thing for my child. And I decided to try going to a different midwifery place. And it was more connected to the state and to the hospital. And I made a very bad decision in going there instead. I should have stayed with the first midwife. But I went to the next one because she said she was a nurse as well. Well, so was the other one. She was a midwife. But she said that she had hospital rights, so she made it sound like she had better access to the hospital for some reason. And she said that it would happen in the hospital, that she would be there as the midwife, but we would be in the hospital, and then if something went wrong, the doctor would be right around the corner. So I thought, well, it's still sort of the same idea, and it's not the water bath like I wanted, but, I thought it was a safe option. And unfortunately, I didn't realize, actually, there were several individuals who were already thinking of ways to take my son from me before he was ever born. That's not paranoia. It's not any kind of suspicious thoughts. And it's not like I thought somebody should take my son from me because I knew I wasn't a good mother or something. I mean, I'd worked as a nanny most of my entire life. I knew I was going to be an excellent mother. I didn't have any doubt about that. What I didn't realize is that the United States basically had already decided my entire future for me, or thought that they could determine what I did and didn't do. And basically, any child coming from somebody from my family has almost been seized like government property. If the family does not go along with what the government wants, and if the government hasn't been able to find a way to intimidate or blackmail somebody who's not already involved in one of their programs, then they find ways to kidnap, basically, and steal. They've been stealing our children from us and using them for government programs and research. Since I had no part in anything to do with the government, and nobody had ever shared that with me, that members of my family were already involved in that and forced to work for different government programs. I think most people knew that with my nanny experience, there was no way that they were going to ever come close to doing anything that they wanted to do with my son. Or at the time, they first thought it was going to be a girl. They didn't know it was going to be a boy. So it was going to be impossible to use my child for government programs because they didn't want me to know that I was part of a government program. Nobody had even told me. No one had told me, of course, that my migraines were government triggered and that I had implants and that I'd had records destroyed for me, and there's a deer in my garden and I have to shoo it away. Cannot believe these deer. Sorry about that. If that happens again, I'm going to have to shoot them out again. So I had no idea. I think the reason why they felt they couldn't use my son if my son was with me is because I was not consenting to being part of any kind of a government program to begin with. And I don't believe that they wanted me to know that anyone in my family was involved because they hadn't figured out a way to entrap me into silence and secrecy. I mean, they had already tried to negotiate, you know, a law firm had asked me to sign a confidentiality agreement and agree to not say anything about a legal matter. And even though I wasn't blogging at the time and I wasn't sharing my entire story with the world, I think they felt uncomfortable with the idea that I was the type of person who was going to call the reporter if I was being harassed and repeatedly assaulted. So what was I going to do if they tried that with my child? I mean, it just wasn't going to happen. And they knew, based on my experience as a nanny, I never laid a hand on any child I was with. I never participated in any kind of research or experimentation against any child, and I never spanked anyone's child. I never touched anybody else's child. I learned a lot of ways to discipline without using physical force. And I was never abusive in any way towards a child. I mean, I wasn't verbally abusive. I was very sympathetic and sensitive to the needs of a child and tried to treat them as fully, as having all of the rights of an adult in regards to the kind of respect they deserved as human beings. So given all of this work with kids and how I was as a nanny, if they wanted to use my kid the way that they'd used me, how was that possible? It wasn't going to be possible. It was impossible. And they knew it. So I wasn't married to anybody that they could try to convince or use on their behalf or try to blackmail. They didn't have any way to get to my son. And it seems to me that this country has been desperate for excuses to keep some families down and then excuses for torturing kids from certain families. For what? I want my son to be used for the government to have what? A life the way that they've treated me? Look at the kind of life that this government has rewarded me with. And I see that my parents look really happy. They've been happy for about 20 years. I mean, this government has been thrilling to work for. Imagine the perks. And I think, and I am going to want the government to steal my child and treat and torture him and condition him and program him so that he can have a miserable life just like the rest of us and end up being some kind of a person that they treat as not even a person anymore and they just use for further torture research. I mean, is that what my son is headed towards? Because they started out torturing him. And, you know, what happens 10 or 20 years from now when he starts to figure things out? They get to torture him even worse with their even better technology that they'll have by that point. So I had people coming from all angles. It seemed very natural at first. I, first had people just who seemed like they wanted to be parents so badly. We'll give you a job at our law firm and you can work for us and we'll pay for all your expenses, and we really just want a little girl and we heard that you're having a girl and we'd like to adopt your child. And I'm 6 months pregnant. Or I had this woman named Sybil who was a Mormon and worked for the state, and she really gave a bad name to Mormonism, and she really acted a lot more like CIA than a Mormon. That woman was definitely more like CIA than Mormon. And she approached me. I had never met her in my life. She watched me, observed me for the longest time in the library. Then she comes out of the woodwork and approaches me and starts asking me about how far along I am and what's the sex of the baby, and then goes on this very gentle and long, it was like she was recruiting me for the CIA, but no, she was recruiting me to be willing to give up my child. And she spent probably a half an hour talking about how, but her whole twist was to say how the best possible thing for my child would be to have a two-parent home, to have a mother and a father. And what kind of male role models would my child have? And I thought it was a girl at the time, but she was talking about a mother and a father for the girl, or a boy, to set an example. And she was going on about how it's not right for a single woman to have a child. It's not like I wasn't an independent person. I had been supporting myself since I was 18 years old. I had moved out of my parents' house and was supporting myself on my own since I was 18. I was then 31. So all that time from age 18 to age 31, I supported myself. I was totally independent. I owned my own cars, paid for my own insurance, got my own work, except for a couple jobs where I was forced to work for government individuals, and scheduled my own classes in college. And then I held these lawsuits all on my own. It wasn't like I filed lawsuits as in Kate Middleton filed a lawsuit. I mean, no offense, but typically when somebody says, well, I had to file a lawsuit, they say themselves, but they're talking about their lawyer. They hired a lawyer, paid a lawyer to do the lawsuit for them. So when someone talks about, Kate Middleton successfully sued the so-and-so, it's that, she got a good lawyer, and the lawyer did the work. They never really talk about the lawyer. It's always the plaintiff's lawsuit. Well, for me, it was my lawsuits, and I was having to do it myself because of lawyers backing out at the last minute, putting me in that kind of a position. And I did a very good job when I was forced into that position. So I was doing all of these different things on my own. Clearly I could balance my plate, and I had these people acting like I couldn't take care of my own child. And I didn't realize then that it wasn't a matter of just people wanting to have a kid of their own. It was that the government was already involved and they wanted my child. So, what they wanted to do with me in the absence of a child, I'm not sure. But I think that also the government, whatever they were doing, I mean, basically so far they'd just been torturing me and ruining my life. If they had other ideas, it was maybe for me, or my family did. Possibly they thought I'd be safer if I was married, but that wasn't my big goal in life. And I think they thought that, basically I think probably they had me on some kind of trajectory where they felt that if other federal agents had been able to get close to me when I was incapacitated in Oregon, I think they thought that there was potential to use me further. I mean, isn't that what they had done to me and what they quote-unquote trained me for when I was a kid? That they destroyed records over in 1977?